Welcome. It's not the evening, it's the afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to yet another wonderful week of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, and today we'll be talking about the latest update regarding the Erie County Fair. Yes, it is happening, folks, and we have the details here. In addition, we have a special guest. It's going to be a surprise, but it's definitely related to the fair, and it's related to lunch, and you're going to really enjoy it. This week, on the State of Greater Western New York Report, brought to you by...
Imagine yourself communicating with a difference. Pan-Dimensional Solutions helps you do this. Whether live spectator events, taped broadcasts, or real-time audience-engaging programs, you can benefit immediately from the tools Pan-Dimensional Solutions will share with you. Do you want to make a difference? Contact us at pandimensional.com. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report.
Hey, welcome again to this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, your fabulous and entertaining host, and we welcome you once again to discover what's going on in the state of Greater Western New York. What do we have to report today? Well, we've got some very interesting news out of Hamburg, New York. The Erie County Fair. Yes, the Erie County Fair once again will be occurring. As you know, COVID caused it to take a year off last year. It's only happened a few times in its history, as we'll get to in a moment. But we have a special announcement from the fair itself. We would have liked to welcome the CEO of the fair on, but they're very busy because it's happening again. Yes, the Erie County Fair Summertopia is occurring this August from the 11th to the 22nd. That's about 76 days away, I think, if my math is correct, because I downloaded this image yesterday. Well, the Erie County Fair, the Erie County Agricultural Society, is looking forward to being able to safely host the 2021 Erie County Fair, one of the premier summertime events in Western New York. Again, it's scheduled from August 11th to the 22nd, and according to CEO and fair manager Jessica Underberg, she says, "We have already started working with the health department officials on appropriate measures for the event. If you plan on attending the Erie County Fair, it may not look the same, but it will remain true to the values and traditions that are reminiscent of the annual event." She held a press conference a little while back as the news came out, and the news is relatively new, just about a week or so old. And there's going to be some changes in the way that they do things because of health and safety protocols. Gates will be required, guests will be required to purchase tickets online and choose the day that they want to come. So there will be no tickets sold at the gate. You might recall that there are a lot of fun things that happen every year at the fair, and a lot of these things will be continuing. For example, there's a full slate of programs in the grandstand, and you'll really enjoy what you'll see there. We've got Jay and the Americans, Sawyer Brown, Styx, John Pardee, Mark Chestnut, ATV Big Air Tour for King and Country, Cooper Allen, The Ultimate Night of Destruction, as well as, and this has got to be one of my favorites, the Ultimate World's Largest Demolition Derby. So yeah, you can check all these things out at the fair and see what's going on this year. And it's going to be a little bit of a difference in the fact that you're going to have to order your tickets online as opposed to, say, going and picking them up the way you normally do when you just say, hey, it's a great day, let's go to the fair. Well, now you're going to have to say, hey, it's going to be a great day, let's go to the fair. But there's going to be a lot of the traditional elements there, we hope. Let's see what they say about the Midway. The Midway will follow social distancing guidelines. So that means that game operators will practice social distancing and hand sanitizers will be available throughout the Midway. Protocols will be in place to disinfect rides regularly. And if, as far as buildings and food sales go, buildings are going to be reconfigured to allow for wider aisles, and that ensures social distancing. And food stands layouts will be adjusted to create additional spacing and make wider aisles. And eating areas will be available in parks to allow for adequate social distancing. Well, there's a lot of great food at the fair, as I'm sure you know, and you don't always have to eat inside. You can eat outside, whether it's pizza or chicken. Some of those things are the favorite things that we've seen at the fair. And did you know, though, that there's a story from 1885 involving a different type of food? It's the hamburger. That's right, the hamburger was invented at the Erie County Fair, according to research, in the year 1885. And the Erie County Fair has a museum inside of it in the old octagonal building. Well, I guess it's still the octagon building, and it is old. And it was also from around 1885, if I remember correctly, or right around there. They've got a little museum in there, and in the museum, they have the history of the hamburger at the Erie County Fair, created by the Menches brothers, Charles and Frank Menches, in 1885. They were quite young, in their 20s, when they did this. And there's a little place that you could bring kids to that will show you how to make a hamburger. So it's all plastic, so it's not real. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually have an early break before we bring on our special guest, and then we'll go directly to our normal activities. And let's just line things up here so that you can see everything. There we are. Okay. Well, not really. I lied. So we are going to have a special guest on in a moment. But first, what I'll say is that you are listening to and watching the State of Greater Western New York report. Again, the news that we have is that the Erie County Fair is going to occur this year, the 11th through the 22nd. And believe it or not, the Erie County Fair started in 1820. That's right. And this is the 181st running of the Erie County Fair. So you might say, well, wait a second, the numbers don't add up. That's right. The Erie County Fair skipped several years, including a lot after it initially started. But here's something else that's of interest. The Erie County Fair was established in 1820. Erie County is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year. What does that tell you? It tells you that the Erie County Fair is actually older than Erie County itself. That's right, the fair started from the Niagara Agricultural Committee or group, Niagara County Agricultural Committee, the year before Erie County was established. When Erie County was established, the fair had been occurring in what became Erie County, so it inherited the fair as long as the Erie County Historical Society that came about in 1821. But the fair is actually a year older than Erie County. I bet you didn't know that. Well, now you do. Well, right now we're going to take a little early break, and then we're going to bring on our special guest. Stay tuned for the rest of the story.
Within the mists of time lie buried uncoverable answers to history's most compelling questions. What really happened to the lost continent of Atlantis? How did ancient Greeks possess the technology to create the Antikythera mechanism, and what did they use it for? Why did hundreds of people suddenly start dancing in the streets of Strasbourg during July 1518, and then, just as suddenly, die? Who was Jack the Ripper? And finally, where did Amelia Earhart end up? These questions pale to the ultimate mystery. It's the mystery behind something that has touched us all and will continue to touch generations into the future. It's the mystery behind a trillion-dollar industry. It's the mystery behind something so simple, so common, so obvious, that no one bothered to write it down. It is the birth of the world's first hamburger. Did the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis really inaugurate the Hamburg sandwich, as purportedly described in a New York Tribune article that same year, and as taught by McDonald's famous Hamburger University? Or was the first hamburger made in 1900, at Louis' Lunch, a diner in New Haven, Connecticut, as reported by the New York Times, and recognized as such by the Library of Congress? Or did Fletcher Old Dave Davis first place a ground beef patty on bread in the late 1880s as suggested by the Dallas Morning News? And if the hamburger really was first invented in 1885, either by Charles and Green at the Outagamie County Fair in Seymour, Wisconsin, or by Charles and Frank Menches at the Erie County Fair in Hamburg, New York, which fair occurred first? Join me as we explore these various origin stories and use classic crime-solving techniques to reveal the answer to one of history's greatest culinary whodunits in Sherlock Holmes and the Shrine of the Four and a Half? Are you interested in finding out who done it? Read Hamburger Dreams, How Classic Crime-Solving Techniques Help Crack the Case of America's Greatest Culinary Mystery. Available in fine bookstores everywhere, and in an ebook edition too.
Well, no relation to that masked man on the cover of the book. As I said, we've got a special guest with us tonight to tell us about the hamburger at the Erie County Fair. As you can see, this is where they had the little thing that they had in the museum that people can use and pretend that they were making the first hamburger. It wasn't quite like this. Maybe we'll have our guest explain it. And who actually is that man over there behind the counter there? It's none other than press the right button here and he appears. John Menches. Yes, John from Akron, Ohio is with us live today. John is the great-great-grandson of Charles Menches, one of the two brothers who invented the hamburger at the Erie County Fair in 1885. John, how are we doing in Akron, Ohio today?
Well, Chris, everything is working just great. Our business is doing good, and we're selling a lot of hamburgers. And of course, now we have a trailer that we're growing out, and we got 19 booked events in the next 2 months. God's blessed us well, and the creation of the Hamburg lives on strong in Northeast Ohio.
Well, John, tell us a little bit about your story, your personal story. When you were young, obviously they told you the story about the hamburger within the family. And what was some of the reaction that maybe you or other family members had when you would go and repeat this story out to the rest of the world, or at least your classmates in school?
Well, when we were going to school, we had show and tell. So during the show and tell, when I'm in the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I would tell the story of my great-grandfather who invented the world's first hamburger. Well, that caused for a lot of eyebrows rolling and everything going down. And everybody would say, well, if you did that, well, how come you're not rich? I go, well, that's a good question. But we lived through it. We got kind of numb to it, and we kind of quit telling the story until the Erie County Fair came up, and in 1989, I believe it was, your congressman put the Menches brothers on the congressional records, August 4th, I believe it was, in 1989, honoring the Menches brothers as the creator of the world's first hamburger. Shortly after that, we discovered that our great-grandfather really did have an original recipe. And when we found that in all the old records of the family, we just thought it was kind of cutesy. And we tried that recipe, take it to a Stark County Fair here in Canton, Ohio, and voila, it started us the rebirth of the Menches brothers, because they have quite a legacy. So we do serve the original recipe in our Akron area and Massillon and Canton area restaurants. And soon I hope to be able to deliver that to the Erie County Fair.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the backstory on this in my research for the book. I tried to find out exactly when people in Hamburg discovered this story. I grew up in Hamburg. I actually worked at the Erie County Fair for several years, and I had not heard the story. It wasn't until I was in school in New Haven, Connecticut, which is ironically one of the competing stories, that I
Right.
discovered this story. And I talked to people, and unfortunately, I waited kind of late to start this research. So a lot of people in Hamburg who were originally involved with this celebration for the centennial event in 1985, they aren't with us anymore. So I wasn't able to interview them. But I was able to interview some other people, and they originally thought the Menches brothers were from Western New York. So that's why it took them until 1989 to really find you. They were looking in the wrong place, but they eventually did find you. And strangely enough, you found, well, actually, they helped you find the the book, the original book that told this story, which was written by an old newspaper editor and writer who was stationed in Akron in the 1920s, interviewed Frank Menches, and wrote about it in a 1970 book. But I wasn't able ever to figure out the connection between how the information from that book eventually got to Hamburg. The closest I got was an in-flight airplane magazine that supposedly that an old school teacher, retired school teacher in Hamburg, had read and brought to the Hamburger Historical Society or the Hamburg Town Board, and that really started this centennial celebration in 1985. So John, tell us now, before we get into your restaurant and everything and what you're doing there, because I think that's interesting too. Tell us what it's been like now that you've got this really national recognition as being the family that invented the hamburger. How's it like when you go across the country or talk to various media outlets all over the place about it?
Well, what's really fun, Chris, is we did a little more than just tell the story. We went around and we actually took photographs of where their businesses were in Canton, Ohio, and Akron, Ohio, and we put together a presentation on the life of these gentlemen, who they were, where did they live, how did they meet the people that got them where they were. It's quite an interesting story. I mean, to me, this should be on cable networks. There should be a movie on these boys because the Menches brothers were really infamous in many, many other things other than just the Hamburg. And their personal relationship with then Governor of Ohio, Bill McKinley. Actually, they knew Bill McKinley when he was an attorney in Canton, Ohio. Then he became a congressman. Then he became governor of Ohio, and then president of the United States. That relationship helped them get to different places, including up north where the Buffalo is, and then it got them into the Chicago World's Fair, St. Louis World's Fair, and as you mentioned in your opening, St. Louis World's Fair is where the Hamburg became popularized. And then that's where all the stories really begin. And you work backwards, and the other people who've claimed that they've invented the Hamburg, well, if you think about how news travels back in 1885 and 1904 and 1897, well, you can tell a story here in Akron, Ohio, and if you go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, it's like across the world. So now we've brought these together through uh, your book, and you really documented everything very well. So when I go to give a presentation, the people listen intently, and I give about 5, 6 presentations a year, and it's really good. I'm going to be doing 2 more here in the next 2 months.
Incidentally, just for those of you who haven't read the book yet, uh, this is like the worst thing an author can do is to reveal all the secrets in the book. But there's a lot more in there than what I'm telling you right now. The 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis was the standard story for almost half a century until it was disproven by the New York Times food critic by going back and doing some research in newspapers to find out that the newspaper article that was supposedly from the New York Tribune associated with this story never existed. But I found out where it was. It wasn't the New York Tribune. And I talk about that in the book. In either case, the stories, whether it's 1904 at the St. Louis World's Fair or 1900 at Louis Lesson's Louis' Lunch in New Haven, Connecticut, those can't be true because we know that as early as 1893, they were selling hamburgers in a saloon in Texas. That's in the paper. That's in a Texas paper. And by 1894, they are telling you stories of Hamburg food trucks, Hamburg sandwich food trucks, and describing how they're making these Hamburg sandwiches, and even doing an illustration of the chef or the cooker flipping a couple of burgers, actually two at the same time. Now it's just an illustration, it's not a real picture. So we don't know if they really did it, but they were cooking hamburgers at that early date. So John, tell us a little bit about the story behind how you discovered the recipe, and maybe what you first thought when you tasted what that recipe came out with.
Well, in 1989, unfortunately, our mother passed away. And come 1991, the family decided to have a family reunion at Goodyear Wingfoot Lake in here in Akron, Ohio. And my sisters brought out all the trinkets your mom had. And it was time to discuss mom and celebrate and what have you. Well, in these trinkets that they brought out, there was some information from my grandmother, who also passed away in 1972. But she had things from our great grandmother from 1928. And in that, we discovered the original recipe to the hamburger. Now, we didn't understand this thing. And after our research, we understood why my great grandfather did what he did. The hamburger really is an invention out of necessity. It wasn't something that was pre-planned. As your book clearly points out very well, the history of the weather, the history of the swine epidemic, and all these social things that happened at a festival and a fair brought it all together. So my great grandfather created the hamburger out of necessity, because chopped beef back then was taboo. It was only for the poor people or what have you. At the fairs, sausage was king, and the different kinds of sausage is what everybody came for. So when we discovered the recipe and we tried it, we go, hey, this is pretty good, quite different. Two of the ingredients we tell you about, so if you get a chance to try it, coffee and brown sugar are two of the ingredients that are in this recipe. And it really livens the sandwich up with the other ingredients that also are in it. So we liked it. We tried the Stark County Fair in 1991 here in Canton, Ohio. And by the end of the fair, we were the talk of the city of Akron and the city of Canton. We were on back then you only had three television stations, ABC, NBC, and CBS. We were on all three stations, and we were picked up by the Associated Press. And voila, we thought we were having some fun, some cutesy things. We had a lot of history posted up at our booth, and it went viral. I mean, I'd like to have had it today with today's social media. It would have been instantaneously around the world. But back in 1991, we didn't have what we got today. So we had a great time, and here we are today.
Well, here we are today. And from there, you and some other family members established a couple of restaurants in and around the Akron area. And it's great. I have to admit, I went there. If you remember when Andre Reed was elected or inaugurated into the Hall of Fame, the whole family packed up in the family truckster and we went to Canton. And on the way, we passed by Akron, because that's what you have to do. And we said, hey, let's go see John at the Menches Brothers restaurant. I don't think I actually had met you. I think that was the first time I met you. And
it was.
I've had the original hamburger, and it is quite tasty. I will admit that. In fact, everybody in my family thinks it's quite tasty. But that's not the only thing you serve in the restaurant. In fact, that's not the only kind of hamburger that you serve at the restaurant. Tell us a little bit about how you decided to do what you did in terms of your menu at the restaurant, and maybe how that's going now. Maybe even in particular how you were able to get over the whole COVID thing and own a restaurant at the same time.
Well, that's a very good question. With the COVID and how we're doing things, we had to create something that would be inviting for the people to take carry out. So what we did, my sister came up with 50 different recipes for a hamburger that you could buy. So at our restaurant, we got 50 different recipes, from spicy stuff to mushrooms to bacons to eggs and bacon on hamburgers. and we've really created quite the thing. We are a pretty good, well-known restaurant here in Northeast Ohio. Our business has been better than most all restaurants. Uh, God's blessed us well with the takeout business, and then when COVID released, we started right back where we left off in 2019, and then our trailer's taken off. We got beautiful concession trailer, and we don't even advertise it now. It's just getting so booked. So I don't know what else I can tell you, but man, if you're in the Akron area, look us up because it'll be a treat. We're better than Cheers.
So tell me about how the family's doing now. You've got the next generations who are starting to get involved in there, and how do they treat this? They didn't have to go through the same thing that you and your brothers and sisters had to go through in terms of, convincing people that this was true. They have the benefit of having all this research now already done for them. What's their reaction in all this?
Well, Chris, in the beginning, I'm kind of like the cheerleader to keep this thing going. And after a while, when we've done so much and we got so much business and recognition, the grandkids have grown up into this, and my kids have grown up into this, and now they're taking the flag on our Facebook. Just the other day, last Friday, we had 9 grandchildren and nieces and nephews working at the restaurant at one time. And we posted that because that's our third and fourth generation, and they're really they're into it. They like it. They talk about it now. Before they were afraid to talk about it because they're afraid people would laugh at them, and now it's getting to be, hey, this is us, and we know it. And everyone believes today that the Menches Brothers Hamburg can become a national product. We're really picking up that much steam, and the people that come from out of town, people that come to the Canton Football Hall of Fame, and of course we have the golf at Firestone. People are now looking us up and making this one of their permanent stops. So we're taking off. It's more fun. We're all healthy. The businesses are doing good. Our brother's restaurant in Massillon and Canton are both doing well, and we're making a pretty good name here in Northeast Ohio, even since you've been here. But yes, that first visit you came in was really ironic. I remember that day with your wife and your kids, and is this really true? Is this really true? And yet, but you already knew a lot of the right stuff, and I just confirmed it for you.
That's right. That's right. Good reporter always is going to have multiple sources on the story. So tell. I mean, one of the things, and we've got a couple minutes left here, and I really think we should tell the audience about the brothers themselves. And the Hamburger is maybe what we talk about now, but they were involved in much more than that. They were serial entrepreneurs. They invented other things, and I think you have one of their inventions in your restaurant, if I remember correctly, the waffle iron. Tell us very quickly about that, and maybe about the movie theater and things like that.
Well, the Menches brothers were quite entrepreneurs. And yes, we talk about the Hamburg, but in our restaurant, we show that the Menches brothers also created the world's first ice cream cone at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. And they also created the first candy coated popcorn, caramel corn, at the 1893 Chicago's World's Fair, which today in 1897 was named Cracker Jacks. So we have all those displays. Now, our family doesn't go without having issues as anybody else's. My great grandfather and great uncle were German, and it wasn't popular being German during World War One. In fact, it was pretty bad. So they sold out all their businesses that they had in Akron and Canton, Ohio, and they turned their resources into building one of the first movie houses in Akron. They built a hotel and they built a hardware store, and that's what they converted everything to. And now, when the city of Akron gives tours on their local tour bus, they talk about the Menches brothers quite a bit. So we've raised them up, and the stories go on. If you need me, come me. I'll come and tell the stories for you, how that all happens and why they named it what they did.
Yeah, in fact, you should mention that in terms of the discrimination against the Germans, when they started that movie theater, they had a contest for the name, and the winning name was Liberty. So
That's
this was a
correct.
very patriotic name, and it was done so purposefully, and it was very successful too. In fact, I think they were involved in some guild or something, one of the first motion picture production or theater palace associations. They were quite involved in that industry too.
Yes,
So
they were, and they were one of the first movie houses with cool air, and the first movie house in Akron was sound.
yes,
Pretty
so
good.
so it was very very interesting. In fact, I remember reading about it. They designed it purposely in order to prevent damage from fires. The way the projection room was done is very very interesting. And again, these guys are a couple of typical American entrepreneurs. Always going for the leading edge, no matter what industry they were in, and they're quite inspirational in themselves. Well, John, that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for showing up and sharing your stories, John Menches, great great grandson
Appreciate
of
it.
Charles Menches, inventor of the Hamburger. I'm Chris Carosa saying thank you once again for watching the State of Greater Western New York Report. Bye bye for now.